I convene and call to order the Planning Commission meeting for November 20th. May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Willers.
Here.
Commissioner O'Neill.
Here.
Commissioner Barnett.
Present.
Commissioner Nugent.
Present.
Commissioner Latimer.
Here.
Vice Chair WIRICK.
Here.
Chair DAMBACH.
Here.
And Youth Member PEDERSEN.
Here.
All right, now we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any reason to change the agenda as it currently stands? I'm seeing none, so there is approval of the agenda. May we please have a roll call?
Commissioner Willers.
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill.
Yes.
Commissioner Barnett.
Yes.
Commissioner Nugent.
Aye.
Commissioner Latimer.
Yes.
Vice Chair WIRICK.
Aye.
Chair DAMBACH.
Yes.
Youth Member PEDERSEN.
Yes.
All right, and now we will move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll stand. All right, moving right along, we'll now open for public comment, and these will be comments that are on any agenda, on any item which is not appearing on the agenda. And I would ask when members of the community come up to please state your name and spell as necessary. Is there anyone who would like to speak?
Let me
All right.
fight my way up here. I'm not used to the place being empty. Must be a boring agenda tonight, huh? Jeez. Anyway, I have just a short statement that I want to put on record. Unlike most of us our age, I have to take off my glasses to read.
Excuse me, can you state your name?
Oh yeah, that's right, I forgot. I'm a little nervous. Jesse Ortiz, Jesseortiz. You don't need my address, right? That's okay. Okay, this is to, I stated this at the council meeting a couple weeks ago, and now for the planning commissioners here too. My name is Jesse Ortiz, and I'm here on behalf of over 100 neighbors who will be adversely affected by the proposed 50 to 60 unit townhouse project at the corner of 5th Street East and Napa Road by City Ventures. I wish to put on record that the neighborhood expects the City Council and the Planning Commission to be transparent and forthcoming in a timely manner regarding any and all motions or actions in connection with the annexing, rezoning, and the future development of the said property site. I wish to be clear that the neighborhood will remain vigilant and concerned by the scale and the scope of the proposed project. The reason I wrote this is when City Ventures had their open house, I think it was almost a month ago. There were well over 100 people that attended, and the vast majority of the neighbors never heard that the project was even on the table. This was the first time they heard about it. So, I think it's important that the word gets out. We've got the neighborhood canvas. We're telling everyone what's going on. And obviously we're not anti-growth, but something in the 20 to 25 unit range would be a lot better in that neighborhood. But anyway, that's it. I've used up my 3 minutes of time. Thank you thanks for listening to me. Hope you guys keep that in mind. It's, like I said, a lot of the neighbors didn't know about it, and they're just worried because at the open house, it was a 50 unit or 51 unit proposal. 2-3 months ago when we were all here, it was a 61 unit proposal. So somehow it's scaled back. I don't know why. I don't know if there was dialogue from the city that, hey, guys, you got to tone it down. Obviously, we'd like to see it toned down to about half of the 51. So anyway, thanks for listening to me, and I'm done, and I'll get home and have dinner.
Well,
Thank
thank you
you.
for your comment.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I'm seeing no one else opting for a public comment, so I will close the public comment. And then we'll move on to the consent calendar. There are 2 items on the consent calendar. One are the PC minutes from October, and the second is a request to install banners on Plaza light standards for the Sonoma Valley Mentoring Alliance. So I will open it up to the commission and ask if anyone wants to change anything on the consent calendar or has any comments. I'm seeing none. So motion to approve. Oh, excuse me, what? Oh, thank you very much. Is there any public comment for the consent calendar? I'm seeing none, so I'll close public comment. And now I will ask for a motion for the consent calendar.
Move to approve. Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Commissioner Willers,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes.
Commissioner Barnett,
Aye.
Commissioner Nugent,
Aye.
Commissioner Latimer,
Yes.
Vice Chair Wyrick,
Aye.
Chair Dombach,
Yes.
and Youth Member Peterson.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
All right, moving right along, we'll enter the public hearing portion of this evening's event. First item is item 4.1, which is a discussion, consideration, and possible action to approve a sign permit at West 35 Napa. So I will, and that is the Bank of America building. So I will hand it over to staff.
Thank you, Chair Dombach. Planning permit technician Natalie Brzee presenting for this project. So this project is located at the corner of First Street West and West Napa Street. It's approximately 34,000 square feet with frontages of 113 feet approximately and 303 feet approximately along First Street West. So there's a little bit of background with this project. So they actually went before the Historic Preservation Commission on September 9th, and they were proposing to remove the 3 large wall signs that are up on the building and replace them with signs that were measuring a little bit larger. The commission had asked them to return with a second option within compliant sign package, and so that's what's before you here today. So option A is from their original submittal. It has a total square footage for sign EXT001 and EXT002A of 43.7 square feet each. And then the third sign, which is the same for both options, is only 27.9 square feet. The new proposed aggregate area for EXT001 and EXT002A will measure 18.3 square feet each. In addition to the 3 original signs in the second option, they are also proposing replacement of 14 signs, and then 4 of the signs that are currently on the site will be remaining. All other signs will be removed, so there'll be a total of 21 signs left on the site. So this is the first option for the larger signs. It measures 11 feet 4 7/8 inches wide by 3 feet 9 inches and 7/8 tall, and the logo is stacked on top of the lettering. It's going to be channel letters with internal illumination, and that'll be the same color scheme and everything throughout the main wall signs.
And which face of the building will this be on?
Let me, 1 second. I forgot to put the site plan in my presentation, but I can pull it up when we're done. But this sign will be along First Street West and West Napa Street. So the only sign that'll be the same size in both option A and option B is on the inside of the property, facing more of the parking lot. sort of above that entrance where you walk in by the handicap parking. And then this is option B for both of the signs that are street facing. So it measures 13 feet 6 inches and 3/8 wide, but it's only going to be a total of 1 foot 4 1/4 inches tall. So they moved the logo to the side and shrunk it down a little bit.
And is this on the Napa Street side?
This is proposed for the First Street West and the West Napa Street sides, and then the inside sign will be this one, and they're proposing this size to be the same. It's 27.9 square feet total.
How does the option A compare to what's there currently again?
So currently what's there is, sorry, my notes are missing. So currently what's there, the sign measures 43.2 square feet each. And option A is proposing 43.7 square feet each. Currently they're not illuminated, and that's the main difference. So a wall sign that's non-illuminated can be up to 48 square feet. And our max size of internally illuminated wall sign is 27 square feet. So that's kind of where the difference is. And the main issue is with the way we measure the signs. It's in a square instead of the actual shape itself. So there's a lot of space within the 43.7 square feet that is not even the sign. It's just the way that we measure it.
And can you, Jake, maybe you can comment on this. Is the new signage proposal any different for this kind of sign? And how does this proposal fit with the new
So we're just
potential?
We're just gonna focus on the current ordinance, and then we can talk about that afterwards, if that's okay.
I'll answer in the sense of, I'm not sure specifically for this one. I know that the sizing will matter just for the sign type itself. It's not gonna be based on whether it's illuminated or not. That won't change the difference for the sizing, just so you know.
Thanks.
Looks like they've changed their logo, which is
Yeah,
what's prompted this.
they're updating their logos and color scheme around the building.
No, we're moving into a hyper-nationalistic image here instead of,
So the informational signs that are proposed changing are parking signs. There'll be 5 informational signs throughout the property, and then 6 parking signs, and 3 just directional signs for no turning and entrances. And then there are 4 signs that are remaining, and they're just the Bank of America signage that's on the door, so it's that small little lettering. So we're asking for a variance with the number of signs, because with this lot and the frontages and the rear parking, they are allowed 3 signs, but they are asking for in total on this property 21 signs, therefore the variance is required. Also, the aggregate size of the signs does not comply for option A, because there is an allowed aggregate of 111.8 square feet. Option B does comply with it being 102.5 square feet of signage proposed. Let's see. Okay, and then the illumination. So we discussed it a little bit before. Option A, the maximum size of those signs will be 43.7 square feet. And then option B, the maximum size is 18.3 square feet each, and the maximum size of the illuminated sign allowed is 27 square feet. So option B is compliant with that code section, and option A is not. So if Planning Commission can meet the sign findings as well as the variance findings, then staff is recommending Planning Commission approve either option A or option B for the sign permit application at 35 West Napa Street, including action to approve a categorical exemption pursuant to section 15301 and 15311 of the state CEQA guidelines. Staff is available for any questions, and the applicant, I believe, is also here as well.
Before we start, has anyone on the commission had ex parte conversations with anyone in Bank of America? Okay, no. Is the applicant or representative here? Like, do you come up and give us your name in case we want to ask you questions.
My name is Aaron Craddock. I own Solano Sign Company out of Fairfield, and we do several banks for Bank of America, and this has been the toughest one.
Welcome to
But-
Sonoma.
Is what it is. So yeah,
Would you like to say anything before we?
ultimately, I know she touched on the way that the square footage is figured out. If we took the same exact layout proposed in option A and moved the logo from here to in front of the letters, we would be well under the maximum square footage allowed. But because the way the city figures out the square footage, it's the total sign area all the way around it. So all this dead area above all the letters except for the 3 or 4 in the middle where the logo is included in that total square footage. So if that could be looked over or past, and considered that we're not asking for 47 square foot of signage, it really is about, I think we figured it was like 19, 21.
Correctly, it's 18.6 square feet that's actually illuminated of the sign.
So we're well below the total allowable, but based on the way that's calculated, it does not fit it.
Questions? Go ahead, Commissioner Walker.
So the size of the letters and the, I guess, American flag graphic are the same in option A and B?
Very
It's just-
close, yeah. Just
Okay,
the
so
layout.
it's just a placement
Correct.
thing, okay. And the reason for the two options is because option A is preferential to the applicant, or?
Offer A was what they originally wanted from B of A. And the preservation wanted to see what it would look like if it fit within the regulations according to the current code. And so that's why we came back with this.
Thank you.
Commissioner O'Neill?
Can you tell us what the purpose is of wanting to change this and having an illuminated sign?
I don't have a reason for that, just what B of A wants. I know all their locations have it, and I know other banks in town have illuminated signs, so I don't know why it would be an issue.
Will this sign be illuminated 24/7?
There was an issue with lighting and security we talked about last time. I don't know if you want to touch.
Let me pull up the condition real quick.
It won't be 24/7. It'll be off during the daytime. So it'll just be evening and night.
So we have in the conditions that illuminated signs shall conform to all lighting standards of the municipal code, and applicable sections of the California Building Code, and which sign is determined to violate those provisions, they will have to remove. But in the code, I believe it is 1 hour after opening they're allowed to be illuminated for, but because this bank has a 24-hour ATM, their lighting is a little bit different, so we can take a look at that, but the standard is usually 1 hour after they close.
Commissioner Wyatt?
So what about option B still doesn't comply with?
Option B is compliant. The only thing it's not
Completely.
compliant with is the total number of signs, just because
Oh.
they're over the
I see.
3.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I just want to confirm that the size of the letters, the size of the logo are pretty much the same between option A and B. It's just the positioning. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Oh, go. You are welcome to ask staff questions. Thank you.
I'm a little confused about why some of these signs are falling under the issue of variance. In other words, signs in a parking lot indicating, and I haven't looked at all the signs that they're talking about of the 20-some-odd signs you mentioned, but I assume there's a sign there that indicates that a parking space is for handicapped only, and there's signs there indicating, other things about parking in the parking lot. I'm surprised that the two little signs on the door that have to do with, I think you said their club or something, would fall under this ordinance at all. So how is it that the totality of this variety of types of signs, some of which are not promotional at all, they're simply informational and safety related, would come under this ordinance at all?
So in our ordinance currently, there is a section for exemptions. and directional and informational signs that are no larger than 1 square foot are exempt from counting towards aggregate and sign count. Because these all measure just over 1 square foot each, they're closer to 2 square feet, we have to count them, unfortunately.
Thank you, that's a sensible answer, thank you.
Commissioner Wyrick.
I have one more question of staff. Would anybody care to venture a guess about why we calculate signs the way we do? Or what the intent was at the time? Was it to prevent vertical growth or
No,
massing?
it's going to be more about sign clutter and what that looks like in small spaces, right? And so 3 signs, how many signs does a business need? This one's a little different, right? It's got 4 walls that are visible versus in a lot of cases, if something's located somewhere else, they may only have 1 wall. And that same application of, in this case, it gets 3, but in most cases, businesses get 2.
I think my question is less in terms of the number of signs and more about the calculation of an individual sign's area, about why it's the box, it's
The
measured
box.
in terms of a box.
It's
Is
the-
there a rationale?
That's kind of why we're doing a whole new ordinance.
Understood.
Is to kind of help clean up a lot of those things that may not even have clarity in the code. We're trying to be fair since we're all new. This is our 3rd bank to come forward. All of them have gone through a rebranding this year. And we're trying to make sure that we treat every single one of them the same. I will say that every single one of them had pretty much these exact same variances. I think you guys saw one of those, right? You finished out Wells Fargo.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question.
I have one other follow-on on that. In the way that we currently calculate that box, is that something that's common with other municipalities, or are there other ways that that signage totalage could be calculated?
You can do it by the box, or you can do it, because it's illuminated, which is different, then you can do it by that actual square footage of the quote-unquote material of the sign. It's part of the reason why sometimes when we do boxes, it's more about, okay, here's the location, and they're going to adhere this physical thing to your building. So that is an improvement, that is X square feet. And then sometimes you see it where they're taking up this much space, and so that's a box. And in this space, they can put whatever they want. So there's just different ways, and we just need to be clear in our new ordinance how we're actually going to calculate those things.
And Natalie, could you go back to that table you had generated where it talks about the illumination? I think. Yeah. So again, the option B, regardless of the size of letters and things like that in the box, it's based on the illumination kind of criteria. It fits in that criteria that we have.
Yeah, so option A, because of the way that it's stacked on top of each other, that one is not compliant with our current code. But option B, even though it's similar size and letters and logo, that one is compliant just because it's all linear instead of stacked on top.
Okay, so no difference in the illumination, the lumens that are coming out of the sign.
Correct.
Okay,
It should be
thank you.
almost identical.
All right, any other questions? At this time, I'd like to, thank you. At this time, I'd like to open it up for the public for any comments on this. I'm getting head shakes, so I will close the women in back. They're very silent the whole time, very stone-faced. Anyway, I'll close public comment. And then ask now if the commissioners have any comments that they would like to bring forward. Commissioner Willett.
I have three comments, basically. One is the illumination. I think primarily from the variance standpoint and the way that we measure the sign, we'll probably talk about that later. You know, I understand that the box came out of the typical sign, which is typically a rectangle that sits either as a thing at the property line or on a building. So this is a somewhat special circumstance in that regard. But, you know, for a long time in this community, we did not allow illuminated signs at all, other than overhead illumination of the signage, rather than a sign that's glowing through the night. So, from my perspective, if we're going to allow illuminated signs, that they need to comply with the illuminated ordinance the way it's written. So in that regard, I would support option B as the solution to that. And then the last issue is the location of the sign, the relocation of the sign on First Street West and on First Street West, the east-facing sign, which is now being put up on top of the tower or the building rather than in its existing location, which is below the roof edge. And I would support it being in its current location rather than even higher and illuminated then. I don't think there's any issue with the sign being seen, especially since it's going to be illuminated. I don't think we need to become a community where signage becomes billboards, essentially. And in my opinion, the location of that sign in that location is basically becoming a billboard. And then, you know, again, the timing of the illumination for the different signs, you know, I can't see any reason why the ATM safety protocol would require the lights on the plaza, facing the plaza, or the light facing First Street West to be illuminated any time beyond the hours of operation of the business, quite honestly. And especially the one on the plaza. I think the illuminated signs on the plaza are a special feature. I don't think that it's a benefit to the plaza to have illuminated signage. So those are my issues and ways of solving them. I support option B as a solution to this while allowing them to be illuminated. I don't support the location on First Street West. I would prefer it in its current location. And in terms of the compromise, option B is the solution for me.
Thank you. Any other comments? Commissioner O'Neill?
I'm in agreement with Commissioner Willers. I'd like to state that I still don't think this is highest and best use for this property anyways. I think the bank needs to go away at some point. It's hardly utilized, but there's no need for us to enhance the signage to the point where it's like if somebody knows they're going to Bank of America and they're not looking for it in the dark. So I don't see why we should put the sign higher up in the building. I would also want to minimize it if we could not have illumination. I would prefer that. I know that Bank of America is a large corporation and they like to cookie cutter everything, just like McDonald's does. But in Sonoma, we don't like chains stores around the plaza. And Bank of America is basically a chain store. I also think that Bank of America has produced some really lovely designs and signs in other places like Palm Springs. And I don't know why they can't do something similar in Sonoma that matches our aesthetic. So I'm not in a frame of mind where I want to give any lenience whatsoever. And I would like to see us give as little variance as possible. And I would just like to send the message back that I think that they need to provide something that is definitely more consistent with our plaza aesthetics.
Commissioner WIRICK?
So I might be in the minority, and that's okay, but if option A is preferential to the applicant, and the only thing different between the sign in option A and option B is the way that it's measured, the letters, staff's representation that the lettering is the same size, the logo is the same size. If the applicant wants it stacked instead of long, I'm not offended by that. Whether or not it's above or below the overhang, I don't think is necessarily critical or consequential to me. I would be prepared to support option A if that was what the applicant is desiring. But I also support option B if that's the way that they get it done. I had another thought, but it was fleeting, so.
Anyone else? Commissioner Barnett?
Well, I'm going to agree with my two commissioners to the right, and just add my own comment. I think that I continue to be confused about what these banks think they're doing. It may be that the value of the real estate is such that that's the whole reason they continue to operate the way they do. They're basically empty inside. The bank that I go to down at 2nd Street in Napa is basically interior is a sea of empty desks with maybe 2 or 3 people, 1 or 2 tellers, nobody there, and there's barely any customers there. And so clearly, I think that Commissioner Willer's characterization of the building basically being a billboard is right on target. I mean, this isn't signage that's meant to buttress a thriving retail location with lots of people going in and out at all hours of the day or night. This is basically turning a prime piece of Plaza real estate into an advertising and promotional billboard. And I don't get the whole philosophy behind what banks are doing, as I say, but that's beyond my scope of reference. I agree that placing it higher on the building on a spot that even looks like it would accommodate a billboard is too billboard-like. So I don't support putting it up on the parapet or whatever that structure is above the roof line. And as to illumination, if it complies, if it can be designed to comply with the language of our law, then so be it. But I'm not going to, and I'm not inclined for this application to bend the rules.
Any other comments?
Or
Ms.
perhaps a
Lockwood?
question to the staff, just in talking about Mr. Barnett's comments. So, am I understanding, at least with regard to option B, that the location of the signage, the east-facing signage on First Street West, is in compliance with the regulations? The west, First Street West.
On the one that's on the internal side, or the one
No,
up
on
above?
First, up above.
Yeah, so option B would be in compliance, just because it's 18.3 square feet proposed, and our max allowed for internal illumination is 27.
And its location being located up above the roof line is also in compliance?
The ordinance doesn't necessarily specify where on the building they can be located or not located.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'll make a comment. I mean, I would agree that it certainly seems like option B fits of the ordinance. And I think what we've heard today also is some consideration with regard to illumination on this square-facing side and potentially positioning of the sign above or in its current position on First Street West. So I actually have a question for staff as well. I'm certain that Wells Fargo, their sign is illuminated 24/7 in the evening? Is
No,
that,
I
it
don't
is not?
think- No, it shouldn't be.
And why is that?
They're under the same rules and regulations where their signs have to turn off after an hour past opening, but their parking lot lights and things, I believe, are allowed to stay on for safety.
Sorry, just to clarify, Wells Fargo, the main sign is lit and it is does stay on. Yeah, and then the other two signs are not illuminated on the building. That is the other wall signs.
But the illuminated sign on the street.
There's only one illuminated sign. It's the one on the monument, and that is illuminated at night.
Okay. Well, I would ask if there's a compromise here. If it's possible to, I've heard support for option B and option A, but potentially have a compromise of option B, and whether it's possible to have the positioning of the First Street West below in its current position, and potentially have illumination on the Plaza side, which is unique, to not be 24 hours. Is that a possible way to amend this proposal?
Can you say that one more time about
Yes.
which signs?
Yes. So option B, and the First Street West sign to be in its current position and allow it to stay on for 24/7 because that's a main thoroughfare. Whereas the sign that's illuminated, proposed to be illuminated facing the Plaza, which is a unique area, not be illuminated for 24 hours. I don't know if other committee members have a comment on that proposal.
I do.
Commissioner Willers.
So there are 3 signs that are illuminated. One is interior, in other words, one's on in the parking lot, on the same parapet wall, on the opposite parapet wall. And you can argue whether or not that sign should be illuminated or not. I was willing to, my comments were, I was willing to let that be illuminated because there was some discussion of safety in the parking lot. It's also the place where the signage is least visible. But I don't support leaving the illuminated signs that are basically in the historic district on the Plaza, First Street West side, as well as the Napa Street side, illuminated beyond an hour after closing of the building.
Any other comments? Would someone like to put together a motion?
I'll make a motion. The motion is that, first, regarding illumination, the illumination of the eastern wall sign, illuminated wall sign, would be allowed to be illuminated 24/7. The illuminated sign on First Street West would change its location to the existing location. Illumination would cease after 1 hour, as per our ordinance. 1 hour past closing, as well as the sign on Napa Street facing the Plaza. And that all of the illuminated signs meet the criteria of option B. And that's my motion.
Any revisions to that motion? Do I
No,
hear-
but I will second it.
All right. I guess we'll have a roll call.
Commissioner Willers,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes, and I'd like to put in a little clarity about the sign time, because I'm just looking at their hours. I think they close at 5 p.m. So can we just say illuminated light has to be off by 6 p.m. or 7 p.m.? And be specific? What? Banks don't change their hours.
I would not support that. I would support the language that says an hour after closing.
Okay.
Commissioner Barnett,
Aye.
Commissioner Nugent,
Aye.
Commissioner Latimer,
Aye.
Vice Chair Wyrick,
No.
Chair Dombach,
Yes.
and Youth Member Peterson.
Yes.
Sorry, counting. said no. Yeah. Okay. The motion passes 6-1-0-1.
Thank you, and thank you for coming out tonight. All right, good discussion. On to item 4.2, which is a discussion, consideration, and possible adoption of a resolution recommending City Council adopt 2 ordinances amending Sonoma Municipal Code to implement Housing Element Program 15 and 20, and finding the ordinances exempt from CEQA. So I'll turn it over to staff.
All right, it's gonna be a meaty one. I hope you're ready. Everybody have their coffee? Okay, here we go. Jennifer Gates, Community Development Director, to present to you our housing element ordinances. Few of many to come, so we're just getting these started. So just as a background, in March of 2023, the City Council, it's actually January 2023, the City Council approved the city's housing element, but by March, HCD had approved, so that kind of gives it its blessing and its final date. They did have a few changes after that January, so that's why I used the March date. But in it, it contains a number of implementation programs. And the 2 ordinances being discussed tonight are for recommendation by the Planning Commission, which are specific to Program 15 and Program 20. At the last Planning Commission meeting, I introduced this topic to you all, highlighting, providing you what the language was for number 15 and number 20 and how I'd be coming back with the ordinances. So just getting right into it. So Housing Element Program 15, it's specifically that the city is going to amend its zoning code to accommodate a number of specialized housing types, as well as low barrier navigation center, and also emergency shelters to be consistent with state law. And I'm going to go through each one of these, talk about what that state law is, and talk about what is actually proposed in the ordinance. A question was raised in regards to if there are some flexibility, and I will point out a couple of places, but there's not a lot. So I tried to do ordinances just based on either ordinances that I knew that kind of set some parameters for which we can have discussion around. And again, in those cases, there is some flexibility to be not specific, so you can kind of leave it open-ended, but we'll get into those. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the Low Barrier Navigation Center. Specifically, there are 2 government code sections, or a whole series of government code sections that define a low barrier navigation center and provide those requirements in our state law. The main component of this is that the low barrier navigation center has to be a by right use in areas zoned for mixed use and non-residential zones, which also permit multifamily uses. And as we know, we do allow those uses in both of our mixed use and commercial and some other zones. So since that's the case, we have made some changes, and per the draft ordinance, we are going to provide a definition of what a low barrier navigation center is. That would be consistent with the state law, and add to our land use table, which, by the way, I gave everybody a land use table that actually has where the single family home and multifamily home. I sent that via email today. But I also provided that to you. There was a question around where are multifamily? Where is single family allowed? Is it permitted use? Things like that. So those are at the diagram with you. So they were added to the land use table as permitted by right in mixed use and non-residential zones. So you'll see that throughout the land use tables. And then also to add provisions for processing and operational standards. There is some flexibility in those processing and operational standards, not a lot. I have seen it where low barrier navigation centers are treated just like an emergency shelter. So we're the combination. I did keep it separate, and for your, just to let you know, I did keep it separate section. Supportive and transitional housing. This is a specific type of housing that again is defined by state law, and I provided those revised definitions to you in that ordinance. It gets a little bit more specificity. We did have this in our prior ordinance, but it wasn't quite consistent with the state law, so you'll see some edits where it's been added to be more consistent. Specifically, the fact that it shall be considered a residential use and shall be subject only to those restrictions that apply to other residential dwellings of the same types in the same zones. So when we talk about that, we say, okay, if it's all contained within a single family home, then it should be treated like a single family home. And so if it was a single family was permitted by right in that zone, then supportive and transitional will match. If it requires a use permit in that zone, then the supportive and transitional will match for that type.
Will we have an opportunity to see the definitions?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll open the code after I go through all of it because it's easier to go by each section. The code is specific to the code sections. Also to amend that footnote, it's just a small little amendment. For residential care facilities, we, again, defined by the state law, and again, that it should be a residential use, and just like supportive and transitional, it's going to be treated exactly the same type of dwelling in the same zones. So we did update the land use table, and we also amended the definition. And there is a new footnote now provided next to residential care homes that states, because this is another new section of our state law, where it specifically states that when requiring use permits, the conditions of approval shall be objective and shall not create barriers for housing for seniors, persons with disabilities, or other special needs populations. This is specifically stated in the code, and it just makes it simpler to kind of add it on to our code. For employee and agricultural employee housing, I know it's really confusing. It's so much fun. It is, there's two different things going on. One is, I'm going to jump to the bottom, the employee housing that's providing accommodations of 6 or fewer employees is to be treated as a single family structure. It can't require a conditional or special use permit or a variance to allow that. If you are employee housing for agricultural workers and you have no more than 36 beds in a group quarters or 12 units or spaces designed for a single family or household, it shall be approved in the same manner as any other agricultural activity in the same zone and is considered an agricultural accessory use. So we don't treat it like residential in the sense of the code. It's actually an accessory to an agricultural use. So when I'll show you the tables, or when you look at the tables and you see where employee housing of the larger, the 36 beds, that's specifically in areas that we allow agriculture because it's an accessory use to agricultural use. And then it's also matching. If it's permitted by right, then it'll be permitted by right. If it's not, it's a use permit, it'll be a use permit. I'll show you. We'll get there. Also, just to let you know, employee housing is regulated by the California Department of Housing and Community Development unless the county has decided to take that responsibility, and our county has not. So the changes that were made to our code as it currently exists in this draft ordinance is to add definitions that are consistent with state law as it pertains to employee housing, updated the land use table for the permitted or conditionally permitted which is consistent with our residential and agricultural uses of the same type. Adding footnotes to add some clarity around those different types of employee housing. And then also added provisions for processing and operational standards for employee housing, which is for greater than 6, because otherwise we have to treat it like a single family home. So it has standards for what is an accessory to agricultural use. So what does that what does that look like? Standards for temporary trailer use, occupancy and employment criteria. Also that they have to obtain a permit from the Department of Housing and Community Development. So they're the ones that are technically regulating and enforcing and doing the inspections. Require a covenant on the property, identifying these requirements. And then also require the removal or obtain approval for a use after the activity actually ceases. So it's not one that will remain with the land if it ceases. Single room occupancy. So in the state law, in the housing element section, it requires that the city accommodate for this housing type. This is kind of where our flexibility is. So the draft ordinance adds a definition for what single room occupancy is. It updates the land use table to permit or conditionally permit, which is consistent with other multifamily residential uses, so treating it the same. Adds a footnote, and then also adds provisions for processing and operational standards. These includes such things as the unit size limiting minimum to 150 square feet and a maximum of 500 square feet. This is kind of where your flexibility kind of comes in. That bathroom, kitchen, and laundry facilities and common area requirements. So if there's multi-level, we're going to require that those facilities exist on each level for residents. Also that there's a facility management plan and then a requirement for on-site management to live on-site if over 10 units. That's again another location where we can have some flexibility. It's just something that I have found in other locations. It'll vary on the number of units, but that at a certain point, having a manager on site, just like apartment units, you have somebody that you can go reach to if issues arise, things like that. In the staff report, I highlighted one of the questions. This is one of those questions that I have for you because each community is different on how they want to treat density of a single room occupant. Because technically, a single room occupancy is just a room, and a unit is supposed to have a kitchen and a bathroom facility in that space to be considered a unit. That's how we would technically consider a density. So as you know, in each zone, we have a minimum or maximum or both density for residential uses. So let's say it was 20 dwelling units per acre. The question for you is, do we consider a single room occupancy housing unit, regardless of the existence of the kitchen and the bathroom in the space, to be considered a dwelling unit? Or do we apply a specific density standard only for single resident occupancies? And an example of this that I found was that traditional density would not apply, and that in no case, this is the example before you, that in no case may the number of units exceed 3 times the maximum density that is applicable within the subject zoning district. Again, this is just an example. This is where we have room for discussion around what that would look like. So FAR, setbacks, lot coverage, all those things would still apply to set the envelope. It's just a matter of how many rooms how do you want to limit or not the number of rooms that go within that envelope. Okay. And then emergency shelters. There's only 2 small changes that have happened since we created our ordinance. Again, state law mandates what we can and can't do on emergency shelters. Our current ordinance does comply except for these 2 things. The first one is that it needs to require that the parking for emergency shelters shall comply with requirements of off-street parking for residential or commercial uses within the same zone. As you know, we don't do parking by zone. We do parking for use, but there are certain instances where we have allowed greater flexibility, like in the plaza for parking and things like that. So those are different ways that maybe some other communities. So we're proposing just to make sure that we reference that they need to go to the parking code and that that we will not be able to enforce any kind of off-street parking requirement beyond a residential commercial use. So just making sure that that clarity is there. So that's what we're doing as far as the provision in the emergency shelter section of our ordinance. And then an update to the land use table sorry, ignore my text there, but we're increasing from 15 to 30 beds for the emergency shelter in the public zone. So it specifically in our housing element stated that we would increase it, and so that is what we are doing by that proposal. All right, the next program is Housing Element Program 20. This one is specific to the rezoning, and then this is going to allow developments by right pursuant to, again, our state law, that when 20% or more of the units are affordable to lower income households on sites identified in Appendix A, which is at where we located our RENA list, if they were previously identified in past housing elements. This doesn't include an application for a subdivision map, and then a use by right is specifically that it can't require discretionary approval and require CEQA. That's basically the push. But you can do design review. It's just not CEQA. It's not discretionary. We can't treat it like a discretionary process, but we can apply design review process. So the draft ordinance is providing some new definitions to affordable rent, affordable sales price, area median income, by right, review, and lower income household. I could not find any definitions for these throughout our code, and so it's a good time to add them at this time. We are also adding footnotes to the multifamily dwelling section, because that is when it applies, is when you're doing 20% of the multifamily project for the specific sites that are in the commercial and mixed use zoning districts. That's why I'm putting it in commercial and mixed use, is because that's where these sites that were listed in our housing element are located. So this is what is underlined that you see here. That is word for word what we're putting in the footnote. And so it's saying on these specific sites that this is going to apply only. These are the sites, because you asked where they were. We talked a little bit about it at the last meeting, but this is the visual to kind of show you. So again, the lot next to Safeway. Another one is, I call it the Norbaum property at 590. And then the last one is at the corner of Napa Road and Broadway, that wraps the corner, but it is not the corner lot. So just so that we're clear, it's wrapping it. So these are the three sites that this pertains to, and only pertains to. I did have a question which made me rethink what I was writing in the definition, so I already made an amendment. So, the affordable rent and affordable sales price, when I was doing it, I was taking it off of a very specific rent and a very specific sales price, instead of having it be adjusted for the actual affordability level. So it's not 70%. 70% is only applicable to a low income project. So we could have a very low, we could have low, we could have moderate. So that's why I took out that specific wording. The other question that came up is, what is 1/12 of 30% of, so, welcome to my life. So when we talk about what is affordable to a household, and my real estate agents will know this, 30% of your income is what is the traditional standard for what is affordable to you. 1/12 makes it your monthly affordable. And then so your affordability level is going to, of your AMI, based on your household size. So this is the calculation that we get to do every year for all the rentals and sales prices. Now it's all written out for your love too. All right. So I'm gonna open the actual ordinance, and we can go through it, and you can ask your questions as we go through, unless we have some just general open-ended questions right this second. But otherwise, the staff recommendation is to adopt the resolution recommending that the city council adopt the ordinance that amends multiple sections of Title 19 to implement Program 15, and then another ordinance to implement Program 20, and then finding it exempt from CEQA. So while I open it, are there any questions?
I have
We'll start with Commissioner Nugent.
Yes, a question. Can you give me an example of some SROs that we have currently in the city? Do we have any?
I am not aware of any in my 2.5 years here.
I can't think of one.
I've worked in one city that had him. I've only worked in one, so, and it was historic.
Typically, I think of like a city with single-room occupancies are like former hotels, and they transitioned those rooms into SROs. I don't know, but we don't have them currently.
No, so I don't know of any currently. The only, like I was saying, the only city that I've worked in that actually had one, it was the upper level of a historic building, and it had multiple rooms and then this living space right in the middle with a kitchen, and it was historic. It was just always like that. It was basically a boarding house, the old-fashioned boarding
Right.
houses.
Oh, yep. Thank you.
Commissioner Latimer first.
Are you looking for comments on the stuff that you just presented, or are you going to represent some of those things?
So I was just wondering if there was just general questions. I'm going to show you ordinances here in a second.
I just had a question on your definition of the 1/12 to 30%. How does that apply to sales price as opposed to, I get the rent, but how does that apply to the sales price as well?
It's so when we do the calculation, it's longer. There's a lot more components to it, but we still look at it at a monthly basis, and then in the calculation, it'll output an actual
It'll
final
gross
number.
that up to an actual
Yes.
dollar. Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
I can show you the more elaborate one in a future time, but
Probably based on a monthly mortgage payment, right?
it is
Yeah.
with all these deductions.
Right.
Commissioner WIRICK.
Thank you. I'm sorry I didn't wait to be called on, Madam Chair. My question, my fairly general question, is in regard to the single room occupancy density calculation. And probably fair to say that it's not that we don't have any, it's that we don't have any permitted. Are you able to pull that slide up real quick? The single room occupancy density calculation. Actually, you don't need to pull it up. The latter of the interpretations that contemplates as far as the density goes, the 3 times. Wait, is that arbitrary? Where do we get? What's the rationale behind the counting it 3 times?
It's just provided as an example. I saw it in another community.
I know, but do you know what the rationale is behind it's just to give it a little bit more.
Give it a boundary.
Right.
And so that's where I was saying that is something that you can give a boundary, you can not have a boundary, or you can just consider it a unit.
You know, the three, when I heard that, I put it in the context of a typical dwelling unit, a 3-bedroom house, right? And so that's where I immediately went when I heard that as a criteria.
Understood.
Seems to make a little bit of sense,
It,
actually.
that does, when
Yeah.
you put it that way, yeah, thank you.
I just had one question, kind of along the same lines. On the SRO, you mentioned that the same standards apply, the setbacks, the site coverage, the FAR. And so basically, if we use those parameters, then the number of rooms would be dictated by their size, right? 150 to 500. Is that correct? Okay.
That's correct.
Commissioner Barnett.
I just need a little clarification on something. Are there rules pertaining to, for example, an SRO that is a rental, which for all intents and purposes would appear to be a boarding house, as distinguished from a vacation rental or a bed and breakfast, which is essentially a form of a boarding house? Certainly a bed and breakfast is. The rules pertaining to a bed and breakfast have to do in part with the composition of what's allowed in a given room. In other words, you can't have a bed and breakfast with a kitchen in every room. And there's also a definition of what constitutes the rental period that is allowed that qualifies it. In other words, is a single room occupancy structure going to have a minimum rental period of 30 days? And is that in the ordinance?
Yep, you're right, it's on your screen right now.
Okay. Thank you.
I got you.
Any other questions from the commission before I open it up to public comment?
Well, do you want to go through a little bit more? Or is there any specific questions in the ordinance itself? I did have a couple clear. Okay.
I mean, the only other question I had was just to clarify on the tables, the designations, I'm assuming, for instance, on 2-1, R is residential, but just not 100% sure of the O. Is that, just to make sure that I understand. And then on the ag, on the special purpose, understanding that the land use A, PK, I guess it's ag, park, public, and W, I'm not sure what that is.
Sure. So, of course, the O word just dropped out of my head, but the RO is for our opportunity. There you go, opportunity. The residential opportunity designation for zoning. So residential hillside, rural residential, residential low, residential Sonoma, residential medium, residential high, residential opportunity, and residential mobile home parks. There we go. Those are what those are.
Thank you.
One last
Commissioner
question.
Latimer.
On the emergency shelter, I think you said something about changing it from 15 beds to 30 beds. Is there also a standard for occupancy in the building? Because it's different between number of beds and number of people in the building.
So emergency shelters are only for overnight stay, and so your occupancy would be based on beds and then employees.
So that they would be limited in terms of, so it couldn't even be a warming shelter. You could only have the
it's
number.
for sleeping.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Barnett.
Did you want me to finish or what's what? Yeah. Okay.
Please.
This is commercial gateway. Mixed use. Agriculture, park, public, and wine.
Thank you.
Brings me to my question.
Sure.
Can you identify for me where we have an agricultural zoning other than at the Sebastiani Winery? Do we even have any other agricultural zoning? Yeah, that's the patch?
The patch,
Yeah,
that's patch,
so,
or Sebastiani, and then.
okay, so in,
Sebastiani, a couple more.
so in theory, if I understand the implication of this, what we're doing is regulating the creation of agricultural worker housing by right on an agriculturally zoned site. Am I correct?
Where it'll match how where we allow agricultural uses
Yes.
to be connected. So if it's a use permit for an agricultural use on that zone, then that's what that would be. So I'm gonna show you in the table.
Well, if it's already zoned but the zone itself has to be agriculturally zoned, right?
It's about the use.
Right, so if it's agriculturally zoned and like the patch, they're growing vegetables there, that would be an agricultural use. And then the implication, as I understand it, would be on that parcel, they would be able to create agricultural worker housing attended to that use.
Yeah, so anywhere we allow that agricultural use, we can allow the employee housing. So this right here on your screen right now, I'm gonna zoom in a little bit more.
Well, we can allow or we are obligated to allow?
We are obligated.
Yes, okay, thank you.
I have to treat it the same. So this is the example, the 7 or more employees. In residential hillside and rural residential, we allow agricultural use permitted by right, and we actually see some agricultural use still up in our rural residential area. And then residential low, we do allow agriculture use with a use permit. But again, there's very specific standards, which we'll get into in the code, around what this looks like, how many, how big, how it operates. It's a lot. And then again, employee housing 6 or fewer is going to be treated like a single family home. So at the very beginning of this ordinance, again, is the sections that, the first section we're going to talk about is just the definitions. So there are amendments and or brand new definitions in here. I took out community care facilities because we don't call them community care, we actually call them residential care, so I just went ahead and revised that. Agricultural employee housing, we're now calling employee housing, and then defining that a little bit clearer. Emergency shelters, this is one small modification to the definition. Sorry, I forgot to put it in the PowerPoint. The law changed to actually say that on-site supportive services is to be provided and allowed with that shelter. It can't be treated any differently. So we're just not gonna, we're just taking out the word minimal and being specific that it's on-site. Again, employee housing, calling out specifically the sections of the code that relate to that type of housing, where our state law is telling us what that means. Also what it's not, which is it's not a boarding house, it's not a rooming house, etc. Oops, sorry, hit that too fast. Also defining what an employee is for purposes of this section. What a family is, this comes up all the time, and we really can't define in the sense of, like, I can't say that you're not a family. Like, if you all live together, I can't say that you're not. So, kind of getting into that.
And so when we talk about that it's not temporary or of limited duration, do those terms mean anything unless they're defined? What does temporary mean?
temporary means I'm like a subleaser from you for like, or I'm just gonna live with you for a couple of months. You know, sometimes kids move back in with their parents. You know, for a couple of months, it's just on a temporary basis versus you're a family unit. You're gonna live co-house together,
Okay,
and you're gonna
and-
share all the spaces together. Basically, we're trying to. What happens is, in around affordable housing, what happens is people will come in and they say, I want to purchase this house, and this person's gonna live with me. That person may have a completely different name, not be related, not a partner. They're gonna buy this house together, and so we can't. We just need to have it clearly understood that they can be considered a family as long as that they're not temporary. It's not, I'm just gonna live here for 2 months so that I can get this house.
And to what extent and is it even possible for the city to enforce something like this?
We ask them to sign affidavits, but that's about all we can do in that sense, and just. But their names have to go, all their names go on title, so it's kind of binding for like sales and things.
For a sale, sure, but if it's a,
Or for lease, we require all names, all adults to go on lease agreements.
okay,
Definition of low barrier navigation. Residential care, citing, yep,
really, I'm sorry.
it's okay.
What do they mean by low barrier? I'm not clear about what that term is meaning.
So, when we say housing first, it means that you can't tell somebody they can't come into your, basically your shelter, because they may be in need of other services. So we call it a low barrier shelter or navigation center. It's a temporary housing. It provides the services that they need. You basically can't turn them away because they're on drugs or things like that. To be true, to be completely honest, you cannot turn people away on low barrier. There's a very, like, that's the whole idea behind it, is that there's a lot of shelters that have a lot of restrictions about who can stay, and the idea behind the Housing First initiative is to lower all of those, to provide services and housing to all those that are willing to take it.
Okay, so the low barrier, once again, that's a state-imposed mandate?
Yes.
And does it apply to permanent housing for previously homeless individuals or only temporary housing?
This is temporary to help them get on the path to what we would consider supportive housing is the next. So we can talk supportives a little further down. But you would go from like a low barrier or an emergency shelter, and then you would go into supportive housing, and then from supportive housing you go into transitional housing, and then to permanent housing, or you could go from supportive to permanent.
Okay, all the funding for permanent housing has been cut by the Trump administration, and there's recent put an article in the paper about it, and at this point it's unknown as to what the effect is going to be. A number of people think it's just going to increase homelessness, not help the situation.
Okay. Again, supportive housing. There's a difference. There's a new law that went into effect, which is why we're changing, adding a little bit more to this definition. So there are two different types of target populations now, and if you meet the specific target population for that's established in the Government Code Section 65650, you're actually eligible for streamlined ministerial review. in the zones where multifamily and mixed use are permitted. And so there is a footnote now to that effect, but the main thing is that is a change than what was previously identified for supportive housing. But it does have certain requirements that it has to satisfy in order to get that streamlined review. Transitional. All right, land use tables. So again, the one that you have before you has everywhere that has has multifamily housing and single family housing also. When I had sent it to the attorneys, I had all that, but they thought it was confusing for when I actually would submit it, that they would get confused if they didn't see underlines and changes. So I removed it, but I kept it for you guys and for myself. So when you look at it, if you see any errors, let me know. But the idea, again, for a lot of these types, unless it's very specific in the code, so specifically supportive and transitional has to be treated the same way. So if it's permitted, single-family homes are permitted, then it's permitted. If multifamily homes are permitted, then those are permitted. So you'll see in certain cases where I have a P or a UP on those zones, some of those existed, and then we might have changed the code since we first did this, when we first added supportive and transitional housing, so I'm just basically cleaning it up based on those changes. And then adding those footnotes as far as employee housing and residential care, and then the single room occupancy. So again, if you see underlines, it's new. If you see strike-throughs, it's being deleted. Okay. And this isn't obviously the full use table. This is just the components that we are modifying. So single room occupancy was already in the code. I'm just adding a footnote because we had no direction in our code. We had no descriptions, no standards. It was just an option. And so now we're putting in standards around it and how we want to treat it. And then adding that low barrier navigation that we had previously discussed because it's supposed to be allowed. And then mixed use. Again, adding it because it needs to be allowed in mixed use and commercial. Here is where you see the change. So remember, if you know this or not, emergency shelters, you had to identify at least one zone in your city in which you are permitted by right to have an emergency shelter. In our housing element, we identified that we would change the number of beds to 30. So that's the change that you see here. So I'm not changing whether it's permitted or a use permit, I'm just changing the number of beds that would be permitted by right in our public zone. So that's what that changes. Double period. All right. Emergency shelters, the only change here was what we had discussed in regards to parking, providing that provision in there. Adding a new section on low barrier navigation centers. What are they? What is use by right, applicability? We are going again, has to be permitted by right. So what does that mean? And what our requirements are under the law. So just kind of setting instead of having to go to the government code every time, we're kind of setting it here, and we'll have to amend it as the government code changes, which they do, but hopefully not as much as they do the ADU ordinance. And then these are the areas, again, this is supposed to be for individuals that are experiencing homelessness. And so we want to make sure that they're getting connected to services, that they get logged within our homeless management information system, and then also the coordinated entry system. These are programs in which the regional approach to homelessness they utilize to keep track of individuals. And so we want to make sure that any kind of low barrier navigation center is documenting people that are coming in and is receiving services and getting them logged, I would say. And then also compliance with how we approach homelessness. The other addition is employee housing. We didn't have any standards around agricultural employee, otherwise I would have modified that. So I'm adding a new employee housing section. This is what I actually had in my last jurisdiction that I had prepared. And so I brought it to here. And I had worked with it on it with a housing attorney to make sure it was compliant at that time. The only difference is I found provisions for trailers in another jurisdiction that I thought was applicable here. It's a conversation that I've had with a agricultural employee housing advocate about the ability to actually have trailers or be able to move their RVs as temporary workers move from site to site and allow that, because technically most housing, when we say we're going to provide housing, we don't really allow any kind of temporary use, and partially it's just because we don't know where the sewage is going, and so this provides provisions in that if you're going to use a temporary trailer and things like that, of identifying what the means are of sewage placement and things like that. Basically, I would call it nuisance abatement type approach. So again, defining what the accessory, how an employee housing 7 or more would be considered an accessory use is in these circumstances. It's going to be actually occupied by agricultural employees. It's temporary or permanent structures that contain the qualified employee, and it will meet our setbacks, our lot coverage, heights, and development standards that are applicable to the zone in which it is located. So trying to still keep our regular standards, but they would be allowed as an accessory use. Any questions around this area?
I do have one question.
Sure.
How much of this is optional for us to make decisions on versus basically prescribed by state law? And if it's prescribed by state law, do we need to kind of go through this, or is this more something that you could basically say, I've consulted with the legal staff and we are in accordance with? I'm just trying to understand what
Sure.
you're looking for from us.
So if there's questions about some of this, there are things like in here, the temporary trailer, we don't have to allow temporary trailers. That's fine. We can be very specific, we can be more on a case-by-case basis as something comes up and allow things. It was just, if somebody does have a temporary trailer, staff has the information to help provide them guidance. So this would be something that you could opine on.
It would be helpful to me, I'm not sure about the rest of the members, to kind of have almost a list of here's the things that you have the right to kind of make a decision on. And here's a whole bunch of stuff that is just prescribed, because I'm frankly getting lost, obviously, in the minutia here.
Yeah, there's a lot in it. It's meaty. So low barrier, it's just basically, it is what it is. The code says it. We're just adding a little bit of language that staff's recommending. That's why I'm saying, are there any questions? Employee housing, most of these are set by state law. It's probably why we never had anything in here. It's just always helpful for staff to have some standards around it. That's why I was saying we're just going to state it in the code that we're going to apply what that zone says. Just kind of helps make some clarifications. It's really for your information. It's to help us, but also if there's questions from you guys. If you do not, I can, as I go through it, I'll be more specific. So the temporary trailers, this is an option to include in the ordinance if you want to. Staff recommends that we do. If there's any questions around that. Just to let you know, I'm making some edits where it'll be changing it from agricultural worker just for consistencies to agricultural employee. And again, these are mostly just clarifications. Single room occupancy. This is where you have the most leniency on what you can do. We have to allow it. What is it that we want to allow? So.
Yeah, I have a comment on the highlighted, just to put out there, and it was kind of in line with the question I asked you. I mean, I would think that it sounds like it's pretty well defined by both our current code in terms of the requirements of setbacks and FAR and site coverage, and what's in the code with regard to the room size. So I don't personally think we need to make it any more specific. So that's one thing that I would offer to the group. Commissioner Barnett?
Well, I don't have a specific response to that, but I was going to ask the question. Let's assume you have a single room occupancy home that has 6 rooms and 6 residents. What's the implication for the parking requirements? I mean, all of a sudden now we have the potential for 6 or 8 vehicles, at least. And there's obviously implications of that. How does it compare to the parking requirements? In other words, we require a covered parking for residential uses of some sort, unless the garage gets used for an ADU, in which we have no covered parking requirement. I mean, there's all these contradictions of the law, but I'm getting to the point about parking. So you're saying, for example, in this case, you are allocating 1/2 parking space for each bed?
So yes, we already have a group quarters parking standard, and it just didn't specifically say single room occupancy, but it already had boarding houses, and as we know, those are very similar things.
Yeah.
And so the addition of that term, but then also that if a unit is provided for an on-site manager, so remember the 10 or more, that they need 1 space.
What's the logic of a half space?
So,
I mean, people don't have half cars, so.
no, they don't have half cars, but I would venture to say that a lot of individuals that are going to live in rooming houses or group quarters have limited income in some cases, and they may be sharing cars with other individuals maybe in that shared quarters. They may not have their own. They may be using public transit there, and that I think is what that standard is based on. Technically, that's our same standard for seniors. For senior housing is 1/2 space per room.
And, I, as part of the discussion, having worked on a single room occupancy conversion of a motel, and people who actually lived in those units because of how small they are were primarily elderly, very limited income people, and also people who did not have cars. They just simply did not have them because they couldn't afford them. And it provided a means for them to have a roof over their head, basically. I do think that from a density standpoint, the boarding house kind of 3-room, 1-unit is a clever way of dealing with the idea of how to convert a single-family house into a quote-unquote boarding house, because essentially that is what it's becoming. It's got a common bathroom, common facilities, and they all have essentially a bedroom. So I'd be interested in that because the law specifies 150 to 500 square feet, which is a pretty big range, actually, in terms of square footage. You know, it's the difference between 450 square feet, so a single room by the law, or 1,500 square feet, 3 500 square foot rooms. So to me, addressing the density element is interesting, but what's the criteria for square footage of rooms? Because I find the 1,500 square feet of as 3 rooms to be not really the intent of a single room occupancy law.
So, taking a step back, that's not the law. Those are things that you can modify. 150 is building code wise, right?
Minimal.
500 in my last jurisdiction. The reason why we put 500 was because if you had a kitchen and a bathroom in your room, then that
Yeah, it's a one-bedroom
was a one.
apartment at that point.
Yeah, becomes the studio kind of look.
Right.
Would be the 500. They can be even smaller. So it could be 300 square feet, 350. It just comes into play when you start adding those other components into a room.
Right.
So that's where that flexibility was in. But 500 is large, but it could be, that's something that's flexible for you guys.
And also, what is a single room occupancy? What's the intent of it? It's not, the intent isn't to create an apartment building.
Right.
It's to create a shared living environment that allows people with minimal means to have a roof over their head, who share common facilities typically. And so allowing 500 square feet to have those facilities in it turns it into an apartment, and in my mind, not a single room occupancy. So maybe that's a discussion for what is the comfortable threshold for a bedroom sitting area counter that might have a microwave on it. And, you know, in my mind, a maximum of 250 square feet is plenty for that. And so then how many of those equal a single unit? Is it 5 or 6 or, you know, anyway. Because I do think that the density approach is a way of maintaining scale where these can happen. I don't think we're going to end up with a whole bunch of them, but it's good to, now that we're required to have this in the code, to address it.
Can I just add to that for just a second? So the SRO is not required to have the rest of the shared facilities, right? They're just required to have the room? Or do they have to have?
They have to have the shared facility.
Do they have to have a kitchen?
Yes.
They do, okay, thanks.
Not in the room, though. Yeah. Yeah, in the building, right. And then it's a dwelling. That's considered a dwelling.
So the, in this section right here, the single room occupancy housing units, this is where it says, this is the unit size, it needs to have bathroom facilities, it needs to have a kitchen, and then each room should have a closet. And then the housing facility itself is the common area, laundry, cleaning, trash. We're trying to deal with all those components that would go into a facility.
But doesn't say kitchen.
It does up here, and
But that was
so,
talking about in the room, right?
It can. So what it's saying that an SRR unit is not required to, but may contain partial or full kitchen facilities.
So-
I see it at the lessons.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I think that the kitchen thing, much like the ADU, that's the determination of what an ADU is, right? Is the trigger of SRO to kitchen, to apartment. And we should not include the kitchen in the SRO. I think we should maintain SROs as having common facilities. That's just my take on it. I want to distinguish between an apartment and an SRO. That's my intent in terms of talking this way. Because I think if they do get built, they're satisfying the intent of the state law and will create smaller scale individual units for people who are really in need of that.
Yeah, I'm supportive of really refining the size of the rooms. Certainly, these are kind of like dorm rooms, so people could have a little refrigerator or something like that, but it doesn't constitute
It's
a
not
full
cooking
kitchen.
facility.
Yeah.
That's the-
And also in terms of potential conversion of a home to an SRO, as you were talking
No,
about.
back to a boarding house, right?
Yeah, it also kind of is consistent with that as well. So I would be supportive of reducing the upper limit, at least having a minimum unit size, and I'll defer to an architect of a reasonable size for a room.
And then the tangent that I got off on was parking, right? So a single-family house has to have one covered parking place, period, done, in the city of Sonoma. It doesn't matter how many people live in that house. So I think, parking is parking. And I think the conversion of a house into a single-family or a single-room occupancy, similar to what was traditionally considered a boarding house, should just be allowed to have that happen under state law, but we should confine it to about, I think the maximum should be 250 square feet. That's just my feeling. 150 by code, because that's the minimum sleeping facility or minimum room size for a sleeping facility, and then 200 as the maximum, because that gives you a little bit of room to have a closet and have a counter that you can use,
Did you say 200 or 250?
I think 250 is,
So, before I move on from the 250 discussion, as a commission, not voting on it, just feelings.
Commissioner
Feels
Wyatt?
good, okay.
Yeah, I personally would join in that thought process too, with a 250 cap. But then, how is that going to impact number of units for density purposes?
right, well, that's the next.
That was
Okay.
I was going back up, I was just.
So we got the number. So what's the multiple? I don't know, so at least 250 is an easy number, right? At least 250 is an easy number to multiply, so 4 250 is 1,000 square feet. So every 4 units is 1,000 square feet. So is it 8 units that makes a dwelling unit? Is it 6 or is it 4? That counts as a dwelling unit towards density. Traditional single-family homes in traditional neighborhoods that were converted into boarding houses are on the single-family house model, 3, 4 bedroom maximum, right, with common living areas and kitchens.
Can't you just let the FAR take care of that?
Okay, well, that's good.
Yeah,
It's just a discussion.
I like that, yeah.
So that's what's on the table. So it's sounding like we don't want to consider a single room occupancy housing unit a dwelling unit for purposes of density. So I am deleting unless I see more discussion on that component. Okay, no, okay. Then the density just so that it's clear, because we want to make sure that it's clear moving forward after we all have moved on, that our density standards shall not apply to single room housing occupancy, period. We're not going to give it a limit. That's what I'm seeing, hearing. Okay. Thanks.
And again, that ties back to ADUs as the distinguishing feature of a dwelling unit is a cooking facility.
All right. The other comment that we had is in regards to kitchen. Everybody concur with moving kitchen to the common housing facility?
Yes.
Okay.
And I just need to clarify something. So, let's say I own a house, it's
Yep.
got 4 bedrooms in it, and I decide I want to rent them all out. And is this provision essentially by right? In other words, I can put up a sign on my front door that says room for rent, and I don't have to go to the city for any permits or anything, right?
So in a single family home, if you're just renting a room, we don't regulate that. You can rent your rooms right now. We're talking about an actual business.
Well, that's why I'm saying, let's
Yeah.
say I decide that I've got 4 bedrooms, I'm gonna rent them all out. Do I have to do anything?
No.
No, I can just put up a sign, room for rent, and think, back, be like an old, Donna Reed movie or something.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, I need to put kitchen before I forget the kitchen. All right, so a kitchen, it's okay.
I'm just wondering, when one rents out a room under a single room occupancy provision, how do the tenants' rights laws pertain in terms of eviction and all of the other processes that have now come to the fore in terms of tenants' rights protections? Is someone renting out rooms in a single room occupancy structure subject to all the rules and regulations of renters' rights and protections?
Yes. Even a hotel, if a hotel rents for more than 29 days, they are subject to the tenant rights.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I've just modified this really quickly, that saying a full kitchen includes a sink, refrigerator, stove, range, or oven. Partial kitchen, well, we don't need a partial kitchen definition. And that common kitchen facility shall be provided within the project for every 10 units or portion thereof, or have at least 1 full kitchen per floor. Does that make sense?
More than 10 units, you need more than 1 kitchen?
No, that if you have 10 units or less, that you need at least 1 common kitchen. But yes, if it's more than 10, you're going to need more than more than one space to use. How many was in your project that you did? I've always wondered this.
Huh?
In the project that you did, how many kitchens did you have?
It was a small 1-story. It was in Berkeley on University. It was just a 1-story motel. It probably had 18 rooms, and there were 2. Yeah.
So yes, it's for every 10 units or portion thereof. So if there's 12, there's 2 kitchens.
And if you have 2 floors of a total of 10 units, you need 1 kitchen on each floor?
Yes, because you're going to need 1 per floor.
Why is that?
Just the way it's written. It doesn't have to be.
Yeah, I would propose that not be included in terms of requirement per floor.
feelings from the rest?
You're saying if there's a single unit on the second floor and 9 or below, why is the one entitled to a kitchen?
Or, yeah, or even if there's 5 units and 5 units and one could, it seems like one kitchen per 10 units, okay. And if you gotta walk a floor to go get there, oh well.
So right now, that's the way it's written for all the different types of shared facilities, is that it would be, like a kitchen and the laundry would be on each floor. And for every 10 units is how it's written. If that's not a specificity that we care for and let people just do whatever they want to do, but we want to make sure at least there's one per 10 units, that's fine with me.
Go for it.
Yeah, I think the simplification and saying in one, I think 10's a good benchmark. One kitchen per 10 units and not have any triggers in there with regard to floor.
Okay. All right, moving along. Again, 10 or more units is going to require management to be on site. That's it. 10's our special number in this ordinance. If you didn't see that, it can change, but that's our little special number.
May I ask a question of that? Is there clarity about whether the manager is living in one of the units or has a separate apartment, or does that matter?
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
It's just that they have a dedicated space to. I lived in the dorms when I was a kid. My dad was the resident manager. Again, parking. We put it in below. Accessibility, just making sure it's clear that it needs to be accessible. And then the parking. And that's it. That's the end of the ordinance. Wow, isn't that great?
Thank you. I guess we open it up now to public comment.
Sure.
The diehards in the audience, would anyone like to make comments on this section? And seeing no, I'll close it to public comment. There has been a request for a short recess at the end of this section. Can we take one now? What is the real time?
7:53.
7:53, so 5 minutes? I don't think we have to, do we have to take any action?
This one?
Yeah.
Yes. I'm asking if, so you're wanting to take a break at the end of this item?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm asking, with these changes, that you would vote and approve or recommend approval by city council with the modifications that you discussed tonight.
So moved.
So we need a motion.
Yes, we need a motion. Second. Now with roll call, yeah.
Commissioner Willers,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes.
Commissioner Barnett,
Aye.
Commissioner Nugent,
Aye.
Commissioner Latimer,
Yes.
Vice Chair Wyrick,
Aye.
Chair Dombach,
Yes.
Youth Member Peterson.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Wonderful. And now we will take a 5-minute break. Top of the hour. Thank you. the Planning Commission session and move on to items for discussion, which tonight is 5.1, a study session to discuss amendments to an ordinance of Sonoma Municipal Code Title 18, Signs and Display Advertising, and recommendations for adoption of amended language. So I'll turn it over to you, Jacob.
Great. Good evening, Commissioners. I am Associate Planner Jacob Dunn. So we will be talking a little bit about the draft sign ordinance tonight. This is, I believe, the third study session. At the last study session, we didn't dig too deep into it. Instead, we kind of decided that we were going to do an ad hoc and discuss some of the items in the ordinance, and then maybe work through that a little bit and then come back for a study session. So here we are to kind of go through what we talked about in the ad hoc and some of the changes that have been made. The way I'm going to treat this is I'm going to go between every topic. I have a slide for each topic, and I'll kind of discuss some of those changes and potential changes that we can make from here. And then I'm hoping to get a little bit of a discussion going and some agreement as to how we want to see changes made. So to dive in, we will be talking through some of this updated language. We'll talk through some of the new language. Some of this will also regard the historic district and objective standards there. A sign program, temporary signs, variances, electronic signs, illuminated signage, and then just the general sign standards. So it's kind of a lot. We'll see what we get through. So with the updated language, one of the things that we did was we updated the incidental signs. There was some confusion in the definition behind that. So we updated that to be consistent for all zones. And this is specifically meant to be used for addressing like nameplates or just an address, just standard stuff that you'd find on a property, but it's not necessarily to advertise a business. So this standard was kind of just meant to address, like, if you have someone with a doctor, like if they have a doctor name on a door or something like that, that's what incidental signs are meant to address. And that standard is set at 3 square feet. We did receive a comment from Bob Sanders, so when we created the ad hoc, it was Commissioner Latimer, Commissioner O'Neill, and then a third party, which is Bob Sanders, who is in the sign business and has a little bit of knowledge behind that. So one of the suggestions there was to update that to be 5 square feet for incidental signs. Currently the code is set at 3 square feet. One of the other things is for exemptions. I separated that out because it was kind of mixed in with the other language, so it's a little bit easier to locate with that. We updated the permit review from design review to planning commission, since that design review commission has been kind of changed in the way they review things. Updated off-premise signs so that we can make sure that there's permission from property owners if they are going to place an off-premise sign. So this is specific for businesses that don't have a street frontage. So that's for that. And then we added fluorescent colors as a new language to kind of add clarity to that term, which is specifically for like high visibility colors that you can see during the daytime. We also made some changes to multi-phase signs and standards for measuring those signs. There is some comments regarding that, which we'll kind of get into a little bit later. And then updates to external and internal illuminations for requiring dimming. That was something that I felt, seems like an interest in the community in terms of wanting signs to be dimmed after hours is something we discussed as well. And then multicolor LED and electronic message signs. So this is something we will need to discuss as well. We'll kind of get into that. But they're different than internal and external illumination in the sense that they're more digital. We also made some updates to sign maintenance and enforcement to just reflect the correct procedures for doing that. And then historical plaques. So we updated that to allow a larger signage for those as well. And then along with historic plaques, I think actually I will be getting into that later too. So those new language that we added was for non-commercial residential signs. This was basically added to address signage on residential properties that aren't intended for commercial purposes. That was something that came up with ad hoc, was trying to address people on their properties that just want to put up something about like home sweet home, or I don't know, just anything you might think of for non-commercial. And so that's something else that might need to be discussed as to sizing for those. Some other new language is for barber poles, which has been added as a separate exemption. And it's currently exempt at 3 feet tall and 10 inches wide, which I don't know what the standard for barber poles really is, to be honest, but it was in the code as that way. So, yes, so there was that, and that can be discussed if we want to change the sizing on that as well. Electronic message signs was clarified in the code as well, just so that it can capture what that really is in terms of digital signage. And commemorative signs has been added with the historic plaques, so this will be signs that basically kind of honor someone rather than honoring the place. And that was also discussed during that in the ad hoc, so that was added in there. So one of the topics that came up in the ad hoc was trying to wrap our heads around what kind of language should be included for the historic district. Currently, the way it's written is it's somewhat subjective. There's these findings that you see here in front of you, these 3 findings, that need to be made for signs in the historic district. There's not so much objective standards in this code, though, for that area. So some of the optional objective standards that I've thought of is requiring or having required or prohibited materials. This could be saying that signs have to be made out of wood, or they have to be made out of certain things. Also lettering and graphics. It could also include color restrictions or prohibiting certain sign types. So we have a list of sign types. We could say which ones of those we say could or shouldn't be in the historic district, and then mounting and installation requirements. So that could be something of it can't go into stone, or it can't go into specific materials on a building. So I'm going to stop on this topic here because we did have a project just earlier that we talked about in terms of signs in the historic district. So I think it's important to kind of decide if we are going to create a section for the historic district, that we gather what those standards should be. So we know that we just approved a lighted sign. There was a size standard to that. We could change size standards for those, or they can be consistent with what our general sign standards are. Other than that, I don't know specifically what we should make as objective standards. Looking through our current historic district standards, or what you would look for development standards, we don't have anything that kind of reflects what you would see for signs. So I'm just going to kind of let this be, I'm going to open it up for discussion at this point for the historic district.
Yes, Commissioner Martin.
Well, first, let's clarify, at least for me, given the historic district or the nature of historic districts, if I understand it, we have more discretion, for example, in making decisions about land use applications or houses. Would it be fair to say that the use of subjective language in a sign regulations in a historic district would also be acceptable? In other words, the state is not requiring us to have objectivity in sign standards like it's requiring us to have objectivity in land use decisions.
It may be subjective. That's part of the reason why I believe that it's been written the way it is now.
Yes, okay.
In terms of what was brought up during the ad hoc and some of the discussions we've had, having objective standards seems like an interest, so I wanted to bring that up as a point.
Okay, well, and I'm not finding objectionable the idea of having objective standards alongside subjective standards. I certainly wouldn't want to, in the historic district, and that's what we're talking about, I certainly would not want to have it come down to a quote-unquote set of objective standards that would rely on a ministerial approval. I think the historic district needs a higher level of scrutiny, and I think that subjective standards in the historic district are appropriate.
Okay.
So the historic district, when you talk about the historic district, do you mean the overlay district, which is quite large, almost the entire city, or the plaza area?
Well, in this particular case, I was thinking of the plaza area.
Right, and I think that's really important for us to clarify, because I agree with you in that regard, but I don't agree that it should have the boundary of the historic overlay district. So maybe the plaza district is the better way to describe the standards that Commissioner Barnett began to speak about. And I do agree with you that there should be a different set of standards for that area.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think maybe what we're talking about here is that plaza area. And I think there are probably things that we could objectively say we don't want. For instance, as an example, LED signs, right? Or digital signs, and we just heard today that we would prefer not to have lighting in the evenings after a certain time. So, I mean, those are two things that I can think of in terms of, I think your categories are a really good start, because those are typically the things that we think about. And then again, with regard to color restrictions, I don't know how we would put that language in, but maybe we need to articulate the values of what we're trying to exclude and not make it as subjective. For instance, colors that are consistent with, I don't even know, with, typically historical colors, or, I mean, how do you say that? How do you not keep pink on the plaza? I don't know how to say that.
Remember the ice cream door, the pink door? Do you remember that debacle? That was several years ago. But
the question I think we need to get at is, how do we create language that gives the staff and gives others guidance?
And I think that's why we have to retain the subjective standards for the plaza. I think that, this issue of whether something fits the character of the plaza is a subjective topic. And I don't think we should avoid it, and I don't think we should void it as a criteria. I think that it's going to prompt differences of opinion. Some people may feel Pantone Yellow 180 is not the right color for the plaza, but there will be mixed opinion about these things, and ultimately the decision will be made by a majority. In much as we had a discussion tonight, and one of the commissioners voted no on a decision we were making, that's the process we use, and that's fine with me.
Big dissenter.
What? No, I can live with that democratic process in applying a subjective standard to a unique situation in our city.
I'm just questioning and I was on the ad hoc committee and was probably the one that was pushing this a little bit. Just the ability of businesses to be able to plan and make decisions. And to me, we have to be able to, and maybe it is exclusionary as opposed to inclusionary, so that they can at least say, I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't do this. So I'm going to try to present something to you that doesn't hit those hot buttons, but allows me, because we do need to find a way to be able to allow businesses to get open in a reasonable period of time. And when signage becomes one more thing that has to be, and it's important to businesses to have effective signage in order to be successful, it just adds more to the delay in getting open. And as I look at the plaza right now, it's hurting, right? There's a lot of empty spaces that are on that plaza. There are businesses that are not being overly successful. We need to find some way to be able to encourage the ability to get these guys open on a reasonable basis. That, I understand the desire to keep the plaza as a special place. I agree with the subjectivity, but I do think we need to be able to provide some guidelines, some guideposts to.
Yeah, I mean, I agree too. So we have signage criteria, we have illumination criteria, and I think we should maybe have some restrictions. So we certainly don't want to see billboards in the plaza, and in defining that area. So I would ask for some obvious restrictions of things that are consistent with the sense of place of the plaza. And then the other things might be able to be subjective.
Question. First question. Do you want all signs in the prod to have to go before the planning commission? Or can there be some signs that ministerially approved? Question one.
I think that there should be a two-track system. And the two-track system is kind of a very narrow, standard color palette, standard size, standard type of sign that allows that sign to move forward quickly. And if someone wants to step outside of those relatively tight boundaries, then it's a discretionary review. So they can have any sign that they want as long as it gets approved, but they can also quickly move through the process by, and that's going to require more work on our part because we're going to have to come with a color palette and or on the historic review committee. They'll have to come up with a standard color palette that's an acceptable, broad enough color palette that will allow someone to create a sign. Does that, to the experts in the audience, does that seem reasonable?
Well, so I have this dual thing. Wellender and Dimmler got me on the Sonoma League of Historic Preservation, so I've got that side, and I represent, applicants. I have my own feelings. This corner, Larry always loves the address signs, right in here. But this is a beautiful corner, but I always thought that they put like a brush metal background on this cool historical building. I thought maybe that's the wrong material. Around the corner is a cool little neon sign at La Casa. I think it's great, but maybe neon signs need to be reviewed. The El Paseo one, I'm not sure is good or bad. I don't see it on sometimes. But going down, Capo has a backlit sign. I don't know when or how that got approved, but I think it's very attractive and glows at night just fine. So it's a real individual, as an architect, you want freedom to be creative and you don't want to over-regulate this stuff. So I kind of agree having the standard, and then if they take it out, they can have it reviewed by a staff member.
Yeah, and I agree with you, for the Capo sign and for the other signs that you talked about, and that is, I don't think those people would have a problem coming in front of the design review committee to get their sign approved.
Right.
Because for them, it's an aesthetic decision. It's not a, how quickly can I get into this workspace condition, right? But I also value the fact of being able to move through the process more easily. And so I think we're saying exactly the same thing. I don't think that it's going to stop those individual signs from being in place. I do think that illuminated signs should be reviewed in the Plaza district. Maybe not everywhere in the city, but in the Plaza district, they should be reviewed.
I mean, there's always change on that plaza. So
No.
Mary's changed their logo. They've talked about just simplifying it. I don't think that has to be a big review if it's done tastefully and simple. There's the empty building next to Chase Bank. I did this beautiful sign for the liquor store years ago, but what that will be, should that get reviewed or not? There's the new restaurant, Amaya. I don't know what's happening with that, but we're always changing, and
Well,
so.
I know, and that's kind of what I'm talking about is in the two-track system, there's a track for administrative review. As long as you operate in the boundaries of that, which are more confining, you can get your sign quickly. If you have a more expressive sign program, then that's a reviewed program, just simply because of the nature of the plaza.
And I don't want to make it beyond the plaza necessarily, but there are some beautiful homes on Broadway. And, Dimmler points out that any home over 45 years is historic, which that's, I don't know about that. But I was driving by, this is a little irritating. It's, hold on. The, hold on. The Psychic building looks historical to me, and they plopped a big red and white sign on there, which they change owners quite often at that place. So I don't know how you regulate some things that to me are blatantly wrong. If it was green on white, if it was more, part of the building and the architecture, it would be okay to get it administratively done or however. But there are other buildings that are historic that are getting, I think they're redoing the, where the auto parts place, they're redoing that building, or there's always, it's pretty cool that we have some historical buildings plopped around besides the historic area, so.
Advocate of the variety also.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be something that is so restrictive that everything looks identical to each other.
That's
'Cause
right.
That's not what we're trying to do.
So
And-
if I may, through the chair, so what it's sounding like is that we're thinking to historic structures as well as historic district, which we're also mainly worried about the Plaza Retail Overlay District. So if the direction is to consider historic structures to be included in that category for review, for further review, discretionary review, and also just to clarify too, the majority of these signs just across the board for all sign types are going to have administrative review. There's going to be an administrative permit, which is, they won't escalate to a discretionary review unless there's, unless they're asking to do something that's beyond what the standards are.
I actually have a question about historic buildings, okay? So again, the definition is 45 years, and so there are many buildings, most of the homes in this city are historical. So are we talking about historically significant or just historical buildings? Because I do think we could go down a rabbit hole of houses from the 70s again that may not fall into that.
Yeah, I only mention it because specifically like the Psychic building, that one's not in the Plaza Retail Overlay District. There's other buildings that aren't as well that have been mentioned. So, if we are going to focus on just the Plaza Retail Overlay, then that's what we can do. But I guess it's kind of up to the commission as to what level of review goes into.
Well, I think
historic structures.
one thing I did hear is that we definitely want something for the plaza.
Okay.
And I think it's another conversation around the overlay. Mr. Barnett?
Well, I don't know if I'm unique among this particular group, but when I first moved to Sonoma, my wife and I, it was because we bought a bed and breakfast in a half a block from the plaza. It was a historic building. It dated back to 1881. I had all the research done on it. And as a business owner, because we bought it as an ongoing business and intended to run it as a business, we went into it with our eyes open, knowing that what we could do both in terms of the paint colors on the building and the signage was subject to approval, and if we wanted to make changes, we had to go before the appropriate commissions to do it, which we did in a number of instances because that was the nature of the property. Now, we knew that before we made our offer on it. We knew it after we made our offer on it, and we knew it once we owned it. And I think that I don't have that much of a problem with the fact that to operate a business in Sonoma in either on a historic property or in the historic plaza comes with a whole set of rules that are different than operating a business in some other part of the community or not operating a business in a historic house. And I didn't necessarily like the decisions that were made when I went before the appropriate commissions to ask to do something. Sometimes what I want to do was denied. Sometimes I was given a different set of design instructions. For example, at the time there was the Architectural Review Commission that needed to opine on our addition to the structure of a owner's quarters where we would have something to live. So, but that was the deal. So I think that while it's okay to think about ways of not making the process inordinately onerous, the fact is that if you don't want to be subject to a special set of rules for a given business or a given property, don't buy it. Nobody's forcing you to do anything. This is the deal. You come to Sonoma and you want to open business on the plaza, you're going to be subject to a set of rules, and we can look at ways of making a more streamlined process if you just follow the basic rules, and that's fine with me. That's why I say the objective standards isn't something that I have a problem with. But I think ultimately, if you go beyond it, then it becomes a matter of subjective opinions about whether you're withholding and sustaining and preserving things like the historic character of a street or a building or an area. And if that's too tough for people to swallow, they definitely shouldn't get into business in that particular location. I mean, that's the deal.
Commissioner Watt.
I think the solution here is the two-track system, much like we handled the streamlining of the major use, major and minor design, right? And really look at what our triggers are for moving you, for escalating you to the full discretionary review of a body like ours. Maybe some of those things could be backlit signage, maybe neon signage could be triggers for that major. But I'd like to see there be some language about in-kind replacement or substantially similar. And I don't know, I mean, similar, the word similar evokes object or subjectivity, but there might be a way to thread that needle to where some of that can be handled administratively, we could be selective about what our triggers are for an en-banc hearing, if you will.
Yeah, so I'll kind of go off of what you just said. We do have standards in there for changes of copy, and that's allowed without a permit. If it's similar in nature, it's allowed. And I am getting, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like the direction is to kind of come up with some of those objective standards that can create that two-way system. So I'll go ahead and I'll work through that, and that'll be kind of bring something back that kind of addresses that. So I'll go on to the next.
Jacob, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So if this might be the only place that we're talking about the plaza area specifically, or do you have other? This would be
Currently, we're talking about the plaza retail.
So what came up with the approval of the B of A site to me was the issue about lighting on the plaza. And I'm not sure that when the actual business closes is the right parameter in terms of when the light should go on or off. I mean, having an active looking plaza into the evening hours when some businesses are open, I'm not sure why other businesses have to close their lights off, because it almost actually looks to me less appealing rather than more appealing. And I'm wondering if we could consider something like, you know, all commercial lights on the plaza need to be extinguished by a time period, 11 o'clock, 11:30, whatever that number is, as opposed to saying an hour after that particular business is closed. Just a thought.
So, what I have seen in regards to that is basing it on sunset. So it's however much time after dusk that you do dimming or shut off.
But there'll be certain businesses, the restaurants and the bars are gonna be open late,
Yeah.
right? So,
And there may, yeah. And currently, and so it sounded like there might be interest in no lighting in the evenings for this specific area, but we'll talk about it later, as well as some of the updates that I made to illumination just in general was requiring a reduction in brightness by 30% in the evenings. And so that could be something else that could be considered for this area. It just depends on how restrictive we want to be, or, you know, what the standards would be for the prod versus just general sign standards.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I hear what you're saying. I think what we're going for is not blaring lights, right? So we were talking about welcoming lights, so maybe it is a percentage, maybe it is, you know, until midnight. I think those are all reasonable things to bring back to this body. I'd also like to bring in the banners. Like we had a consent calendar for banners, and I would think those could largely be ministerial. Especially, there may be a design review associated with it, but I mean, I think there are probably some pretty restrictive guidelines around the banners. So if that's something else that can be taken into consideration.
So yeah, we can touch on that later as well. It's included in temporary signage. There's time limits around it, and so we can base it off that as well, and then just specify, I guess, where they can be placed and how large. So, but that is included in temporary signage. Banners are in there.
I think the only other thing would be the language, you know, that's presented.
Okay.
The coolest the best sign on the whole plaza is the best sign on the plaza is our theater, which is beautiful neon and needs to be on, right? So there's an exception. So it's very, I don't think we have too much lit bad signage anyway on the plaza. I don't get any.
Yeah, I think what we're missing is kind of our value system of what we want the plaza to be and look like. And I think until we determine what that is, and again, maybe the ad hoc can help with that, is what do we ultimately want the feel of the plaza to be? And then from that will come all of these objective designs.
So I will take into consideration the banners and whether it should be, or how we should address it versus temporary versus what we spoke about tonight on the consent calendar. I'll have to look into that more and just kind of think about how that language should be written out to differentiate the two. So the next thing that I know will take some discussion is the sign program. So a sign program is really meant for business properties that have multiple businesses on it that all need signage, and to reduce clutter, a sign program is usually one of those methods to reduce that clutter and create a criteria that basically all the businesses need to meet. The way the draft language is that it's based on 2 or more businesses, which would trigger a sign program. And any individual business that applies for a sign on that property would initiate that process. There's no particular increase or special allowance with the sign program as it stands now, but optional updates to this standard could be increasing the amount of businesses that triggers a sign program. That was something we discussed as what should trigger a sign program. Should it be 2 businesses? Should it be 3, 4, 5? Who has the responsibility of doing the program and completing that program? Should we consider increases to aggregate for someone that's doing a sign program for properties that have multiple commercial businesses on it, and increasing what their aggregate allowance is for wall signage or freestanding signs or monument signs? And then also that's goes along too with the allowable sign area and dimensions. So like this picture here you see with this monument sign, I don't know exactly the measurements on it, but it's most likely going to be a little bit larger than what our standard currently is for monument signs. And but that standard's based on one single business putting up a monument sign. So I'm going to also open this up to kind of consider what these optional updates are and whether we believe that a multi-commercial site should have 2 or more businesses to be able to trigger this program, and who that kind of responsibility falls on and when it's triggered.
Well, my gut reaction is 2 is too few to trigger a monument sign or a sign program. I think 3 is probably a more realistic threshold for me.
You know, a lot of it is the context, right? A lot of it is where is the building, what is the building, and how is the sign program for the different businesses either on the building or in the site around the building. And so, you know, the advantage of having a sign program is that everyone gets a sign. It's got a single location, for lack of not disparaging signage, but creating signage without creating litter in the visual environment. And, you know, and I think monument signs like this do a good job of providing both things. They tidy up the signs for individual businesses. They bring them into a common denominator for typically a larger building that has multiple tenants. You know, in a building that is a storefront on a sidewalk, those are going to, by their very nature, going to end up being signed buildings for the most part. But I wouldn't want to see a building or buildings along Napa Street for every tenant that's in that building having an individual sign on the street as you move down the road. I just don't think that that's visually a correct thing to do. It also makes it easier to find the property rather than the individual sign. So, you know, what the number is, 2 or 3 or more or whatever, but I think when there's multiple signs on a property, it should just come into a sign program of some form. If it's a building, there's a program for the building. If it's a building that primarily signage is along a roadway rather than the building, it should become a monument sign. But I think there's value in that in terms of coordination.
Yeah, I would agree. And I also think there's a safety aspect. I mean, you know, there's clutter, and then you're distracted when you're driving. So I think for efficiencies, I would agree. I think if we could have some consistency around these programs, around these monument signs, I think 2 is fine. I mean, what you're trying to do is allow someone to see the signage and not be looking around trying to figure out what's going on. So I don't have a problem with it being 2. In terms of responsibility, I mean, that's a difficult one. Is it the landlord or is it the property owners? I do think there probably needs to be coordination among the landlord and the property owners, so that they all agree on what this signage should look like. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm a little confused if the suggestion is that we only have monument signs if there's 2 or more businesses? Is that what we're saying?
We haven't settled on the number.
Okay, I'm all for monument signs for a single business as well. So I just want to make sure that that issue was not lost there. But definitely a single monument sign for multiple businesses in a particular building, I think makes the most common sense.
And if just a follow-up to that, in terms of a single monument sign, let's say in a sign program, we say that they're restricted to one monument sign. In terms of increasing that aggregate sign area or total sign area, are we thinking, this part might actually go best to Bob in terms of being able to say what sign sizes are typical for multi-commercial sites, and how they compare to the standard currently.
I'm trying to think of examples. So we did there's the, where the fitness place is up across from the car wash on 12 on the right side. There's one big monument sign with some tenants on it, but there's the physical therapy hospital in the back. It's again an architectural custom need that you need to look at. So how do you identify directional signage and identify these businesses when they're hidden in the back? There's the little shopping center that has the locksmith. There's an individual tenant sign and then something on a monument. There's the sign where the bakery is across from the library. It has 3 or 4 tenants on there, which are helpful. So, and then of course this thing about the 12-inch address numbers is getting mixed into this. So I'm trying to think of any other, the shopping center where Black Bear Diner is, there's some names on that. So we need to be careful about, not everybody's on that sign. It would be impossible. So we don't want to junk it up, but at the same time, I thought we were talking about sign programs, and I was thinking the 3 or more, there's like the mini mart across from the high school. I don't think they need it necessary. If there's 2 businesses, they don't need a sign program necessarily, but it's an old center, it needs to be updated, and there was something going on with the Matsons about that. But I'm just trying to think of, we have all these, we have so many kind of custom needs that each one has to have some ability to get approved fast and not be bogged down and be practical. So I have to think about that. It's almost like we need to do a visitation of all our different types of uses, and how do we treat a the blue building with the medical group in there. They ended up having me do just the address number, but they used to have different tenants in there. So it's, and I don't like monument signs that have, 8 small names. I think they're inefficient. So it's usually the larger square footages of the larger tenants that have the more square footage get the signs.
But
Before you step away, I have a question about something you've referred to. Is the current process of getting signs approved in the city of Sonoma unduly burdensome?
It can be.
I mean, the other gentleman who was here is shaking his head yes. So.
Well, we had a.
And what, and.
So we had the cupcake guy took, weeks to get one little sign that should have just been, we're out of, we don't do that anymore. That's lovely. So we take the sign down, rehang it. The building inspector waived a sign, a building permit. We've gotten smarter.
Well,
about,
I'm trying to understand where the delay is the matter of getting in front of the appropriate commission to get the approvals, and therefore, how often they meet and getting on the agenda, and what the lead time is to get on the agenda, or is there some other?
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand what the burden is.
It's coming back to me now. So I mentioned to Jennifer when she first came, we used to have a schedule, right? If you were in by a certain date with a complete application, you got to be on that month's date. But then it changed and it became more discretionary when the previous city manager, city planner came in. He changed it, and maybe, I don't know if it was COVID, I don't know what it was, but sometimes these applications have gotten drawn out for months, and there should be
before you can get in front of the commission?
Yeah. I mean, there's been some bad examples of that.
Okay, so that's one sort of burden. What are the other burdens that have come up besides the scheduling of the hearing burden?
Well, we did the Mercado. That took Wendy a while to review, and you know, it caught, and you guys were charging us so much per hour to review that, and it was kind of a complex, important thing to do right, but that went okay. It might have gotten delayed a meeting or two or something, but it, you know, I'm trying to think of things I've done, but the mini mart was kind of put into abeyance with Christina for months. I mean, it didn't get resolved, but most of the things go okay, but it was good when the architects believed this too. When there was a schedule, we knew that we were going to be on a certain meeting, and we had to have our application in by a date, and it had to be complete. So I don't know how that's going.
Well,
I think it's maybe better.
We can talk to Jacob about that. I mean, what's the
So-
current operational standard that the city is using in terms of turning around, or reviewing and turning around signage applications? And do we have a standard as to what a business or an applicant can expect that the timing of it is going to be?
That would be based on, I mean, given the sign permit that we heard tonight, I don't know how long that one took. But.
All right, so a couple of different things going on. So yes, when I got here, I'm the evil planning director that changed it.
No, it was done before you.
Yeah, but it got worse under me, I guess. But it was our interim in between. The way it was that you had a complete application, you submitted it. It did not need to comply with the code. So things were being approved that didn't comply, and the conditions of approval said you have to comply. But I was finding they didn't comply. They were literally what had been submitted. And so there was just this miscommunication, and you know, conditions of approval are always fun to make sure get complied with. But regardless of that, what we try to do when we have an application submitted is to get the applicant to comply with the code. And that can take some back and forth to get to the point where it's, and this is not just signs, this is just in general. We want them to comply. We're trying to get them there. And so that'll take a couple of back and forth until they say, we're gonna ask for a variance. We want the exception. We don't want to change, or we don't want to comply. What's our path forward? And that's sometimes why it's gonna take longer. Or there's just missing information or things that we are asking for. So that's what's the delay to get to a hearing, I will say. Now, if, you know, we've had a couple of signs that I have done since with Bob. We redid the Sunflower Cafe. It was one of those that just needed a new sign. It looked pretty similar. It was yellow and white, which was the same colors. I think it changed from a circle to a square. And then we just hung it up because it didn't need any kind of new change. Same square footage, everything like that. So that's where we were going with easy ways to simplify things. We already do that in other locations. The red sign that you just mentioned, it's in the location that's already identified to allow signs. So it doesn't need a new permit because we don't regulate what goes on that sign. We regulate the structure and the things. So if we have a sign program, that's what usually regulates, and that one does not. But if it did, we regulate what the material is, what are the colors, and so that we have that continued consistency. This is a good example, not local, but of how that would look moving forward. Again, sign programs, if you decide it's three or more businesses, we need a sign program to create that consistency. That's fine. The one that your example with the bakery and the knit shop and things, those all are inconsistent signs. It's a consistent monument sign, and that's consistent in the location, but each one of those signs looks different. So that's where a sign program would dictate potentially what that looks like. Otherwise, we've already said okay to the monument sign, and we're allowing them to just change out that portion with whatever they want, because there is no sign program. Does that help differentiate the difference between those components?
Well, So going all over the place lately, we're doing, you know, signs online, which has made it much harder in some ways because sometimes the software doesn't work. You need to get a hold of a human. So in the Wellender committee that we've been on for 2 years to make planning and building easier, it's been successful, but and I think it's okay that we come in and speak to Natalie or somebody that knows about the sign stuff and make sure that they're not making an application that's gonna be, we had a couple applications that had 3 signs instead of 2, which was the rule, but we should have known that not to apply for that right up front. And like one of my things is to have 3 signs is okay, so you're allowed a 10 square foot sign on the building and a hanging little 6 square foot, and but I think you always have to have a window sign. So sometimes we've gotten messed up where we had 1 sign and we put 2 little logos on the window, and all of a sudden it's 3 signs. So that's impractical. So
I just want to make sure we stay on track.
Yeah.
So we're kind of digging into just general sign standards with some of that. So I think when it comes to the sign program, though, the reason this came up is because we were trying to think of if we can make this more streamlined, creating objective standards that would meet that to be an administrative permit. Because currently it's a use permit. They would need to come to Planning Commission and they need approval. It's subjective. It's not based on objective standards. So, and that's okay, and it can be that way. It's just about whether the commission believes that should be the process.
I do think we're trying to get there. I just think that we're not, experienced in it. I mean, I think what we heard today was that people are in favor of monument-type signs, whether it's 2 or 3. I mean, I think it needs to be explored. But, this concept that you just brought up, Jennifer, where you allowed a monument, but then people could have different styles in the monument. I mean, I don't object to that. What I think is most important is that you can read the sign and that it's not, the lettering is not so small that you can't read it. So I think, objectively, having a size of font that can be used so that it's legible, and if it is multiple businesses, there probably is a reasonably sized height that can go along with being able to read those signs. Now, when you have a large vendor and many small vendors, maybe you're right, all the vendors don't want to buy into this package. So that's where I think the coordination comes from. Whoever brings it forward will have solicited the other people. But I do think, I don't have a problem with there being some artistic license for each of the sign posts.
You said use permit, but wouldn't it just be a regular application, not a use permit?
It would be a use permit.
Why would it be a use permit? That's more penalizing to the applicant, isn't it? It's more expensive and.
It's just a discretionary review.
I mean, in my past planning, a use permit was more, isn't it just a sign application, not a use permit?
So
Back
that's
to the commission?
So that's where I mentioned the fact that with the sign program as it is now, it's objective standards that need to be met and findings that need to be met for it. It doesn't have objective standards that can make it to where we can say an administrative permit can be issued because it meets X, Y, Z. It's currently subjective, which means there needs to be a discretionary review to determine whether that sign program should be approved or not.
Right, but
I'll rephrase
confused
I'll
on that.
rephrase your question. The discretionary permit that would be applied for with a sign program is the question of whether a use permit or it could be something else, because a use permit, you're correct, is traditionally a lot more expensive. Ours are $12,000. So that's where I think
In the past, it's
yeah,
never
that's
been
where
a
it's
use
coming.
permit, so that's why.
Discretionary permit.
Yeah, there we go.
My previous jurisdiction called them use permits, so I apologize for that.
So we do a lot of work in a bunch of different cities, and other cities I've dealt with talking about this kind of signage, they'll have restrictions on max height of 8 feet. can't have more than one within 100 foot of another. So that might be something to consider as an option. I don't know a whole lot about the ones you're talking about here, but that's just other cities that I've seen with that.
Thank you.
So,
Jacob, you're herding cats here.
I think I got some info that I need for this. It sounds like we want 3 or more businesses. It sounds like the applicant, whether they're a leasee, whoever the tenant is that comes in with a new sign on that commercial property, there are a lot of uses on commercial properties that need use permits anyways, so they would most likely come forward and include their signage in that use permit, sorry, I keep saying use permit, discretionary permit. So, so it sounds like I have a little bit of direction for the master sign program, or sign program. And I'll just I'll work through that, and then we can reconvene with that. Looking at time, I want to be acknowledging of it. I don't know, there's plenty more to go through. So I would like to give it to the chair to decide that.
Yes, I'll look to my colleagues. I think, we do have a mandatory stop time, but I'll ask if you would like to stop here with this portion of the sign program and have it come back. So I'm looking at, I think we'll stop here, and you can take the information we've given you for that revision and then continue on at the next possible time. Thank you for all your good work.
Thank you.
And thank you for the comments from the public. We appreciate it, your expertise.
I had one. What is, Larry, what is PMS 180?
It's a yellow, a very bright yellow.
All right, with that, we'll continue with the last 3 items on the agenda. The first is the director comments and announcements.
Just that I hope everybody has a great holiday and that we will miss Miss Natalie very, very much as she goes to another similar community in a different county. But that we do wish her the best, and we will have our next meeting in December. So hopefully everybody plans on attending because we will need quorum. All right.
What's the date?
20th, I believe, or the 19th, something like that.
Anything else?
Or 18th, 19th, 20th, somewhere around there.
18? Okay. All right, so we'll move on to commissioner reports and comments. Any commissioner? I do have one question. I'm just curious about the status of the Housing Trust Fund ad hoc.
That's on me. I have not got them together.
All right, any other comments from commissioners? Commissioner WIRICK.
Miss Natalie, might I say that was an expertly delivered staff report tonight, which is appropriate in light of your new role that you're walking into with, how did Director Gates term it, a similar community? Right, maybe lesser community, I don't know, similar community, I don't know, one of the two. But I think as a commission, we just want to thank you for your service and the fact that you put up with our various idiosyncrasies and our demands and our needs, from technology to logistics and questions and things as they came up. You have a talent, and you're very good at your job, and we're very sorry to lose you. And thank you. I appreciate it. We have a little treat here, and in the spirit of full disclosure, I'll say that there were more than 11 cookies when I started this process this afternoon. I have a very food-driven black lab. I can assure you that the cookies that we have here are completely edible. They're untainted. I can attest to that fact. I watched this happen. And they were very carefully handpicked. So I think we might have just enough, but it's the thought that counts.
Thank you, Natalie. We'll miss you, but best of luck.
I think it means the cookies were lab approved.
There isn't much that isn't, that's the problem, yeah.
I will
Natalie,
donate my cookie.
keep smiling. That's the best part. Meet everyone and greet everyone with a smile like you do.
She'll be saying, when I was in that other place. No. And
You'll be
as
saying at my last jurisdiction.
Yes, at my
It's
last
gonna
visit.
be good to have your connection over there. And, you know, it's okay for you to be there for a little while, but we hope you'll come back again.
And so as we're passing around the cookies, with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, thank you.
You have a cookie?
Yeah, you can